There are houses in England that do not welcome visitors so much as absorb them. Briarstone Hall was such a place. It sat upon a ridge of Sussex chalk like a crown on a skull, its grey stone darkened by 2 centuries of rain and the particular kind of neglect that comes not from poverty, but from a mind turned inward. Chimneys rose at uneven intervals. A cedar of Lebanon, vast and sombre, threw its shadow across the south lawn as if laying a hand upon the grave of something buried beneath the grass. And somewhere within those walls, on a wet Thursday evening in late October, a man who had once been called the richest in England sat in a leather chair and wrote the last words he would ever write. I did not know this yet. Nor, I think, did Poirot. Though with my friend one can never be entirely certain. He has a way of knowing things before they have properly occurred, as though the universe sends him dispatches a few hours ahead of the rest of us. We had come to Sussex on account of a letter. It had arrived 3 days earlier at our London flat, brought up by the porter on a silver tray, alongside the morning coffee and a plate of croissants that Poirot had returned once already for insufficient symmetry. The envelope was thick, cream-coloured, and bore a crest I did not recognize. A falcon above a broken wheel, stamped in dark green wax. Poirot slit it with his letter-opener and read. His moustaches performed that slow, vertical lift which I have learned to associate with active interest. "Hastings," he said, "what do you know of Sir Marvin Trask?" The name was familiar, as the names of very rich men tend to be. One encounters them in the financial pages as one encounters weather. A permanent condition, vaguely understood and largely ignored until it produces a storm. "Trask Industries," I said. "Steel. Shipping, half the railways in the north, made his fortune in the war and doubled it after. There was something in the papers last year. A lawsuit, I think. Or was it a divorce? Neither. A collapse. His eldest son, Gerald, died in a motor accident near Monte Carlo. The circumstances were ambiguous. The French police called it speed. Sir Marvin called it murder. No one was charged. Poirot folded the letter with care. Sir Marvin now writes to Hercule Poirot. He says that he is dying, that he wishes to change his will, and that he believes someone in his household intends to prevent him from doing so, permanently. Good Lord. Poirot tapped the letter against his fingertip. He asks that I come to Briarstone Hall as a guest, a weekend party. The solicitor arrives on Saturday to execute the new will. Sir Marvin wishes Poirot to be present, as a witness and, if necessary, as a detective. And you'll go, of course. Naturally. When a millionaire tells you he is about to die and someone means to hurry him along, one does not refuse the invitation. One merely packs the heavier coat. And so, on that dismal Thursday afternoon, we found ourselves in a motor car climbing the chalk ridge toward Briarstone Hall. The rain was of that fine, persistent English variety that does not fall so much as materialize in the air like a conspiracy. The trees along the drive were stripped nearly bare, and their branches met overhead in a lacework of black bone. The hall itself announced its character from a distance. It was not beautiful. It was impressive. The kind of house built by a man who wished the world to understand that he had arrived and that he intended to remain. Stone lions flanked the entrance, rain-streaked and stern. The door was opened by a butler whose expression suggested that he had been disappointed by visitors before and saw no reason to expect improvement. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, Sir Marvin is expecting you. He is in the library." We were led through a hall in which portraits of Trask ancestors, acquired, I suspected, along with the house, having no blood relation to their present owner, gazed down with the resigned indifference of people who have long since ceased to care who walks beneath them. The library was at the far end, behind a door of carved oak so heavy that the butler required both hands. The room beyond was enormous and insufficiently lit. Books rose to the ceiling on 3 sides, though many of the shelves held not volumes, but the accumulated relics of a man who had spent 40 years buying things. Bronzes, geological specimens, a ship's compass in a glass case, and a row of carved jade figurines that watched us with expressions of inscrutable politeness. A fire burned in a grate the size of a small cave, and before it, in a leather chair whose wings might have been designed to conceal the failing of its occupant, sat Sir Marvin Trask. He was 72 years old and looked it. His frame, once robust, had thinned to wire. The skin of his face was drawn tight over the bones, giving him the appearance of a man carved from a harder material than flesh. But his eyes, blue, fierce, burning with a cold intelligence that the body had failed to contain. Those eyes were fully alive. They fixed upon Poirot with the appraising intensity of a man who has spent a lifetime weighing the worth of others and found most of them wanting. "Poirot," he said. The voice was a rasp, but clear. "You're smaller than I expected." "And you, Sir Marvin, are thinner," Poirot returned, with that serene candor that men of power find either refreshing or intolerable. "But the mind, I think, has not diminished." A bark of laughter. "Not yet. Sit down, both of you. Harrison, bring the decanter, not the sherry, the brandy." "Good God, man, I haven't long enough left to waste on sherry." Harrison, the butler, brought brandy with the air of a priest administering last rites. We sat. The fire cracked. Rain drove against the windows in small, furious gusts. "You received my letter," Sir Marvin said. It was not a question. "I did. You told me 3 things. That you are dying, that you wish to change your will, and that someone in this house means to prevent it. I should like you now to tell me a 4th thing. Why?" Sir Marvin's lips thinned. He lifted the brandy glass with a hand that trembled, not from weakness, I thought, but from the effort of restraining some larger emotion. "Because I have spent 50 years building something, and I am about to decide who receives it. The current will leave everything to my surviving children. My daughter, Constance, and my younger son, Philip. Equal shares. It was drawn up 10 years ago when the world was different and I was fool enough to think fairness was the same as justice." "And the new will?" "Cuts Philip out entirely." The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Poirot's eyebrows rose, fractionally, but I knew the significance. "You disinherit your own son." "My own son." Sir Marvin's eyes blazed. "Philip is a wastrel, a gambler, and something worse. A man who mistakes charm for substance. He has borrowed against every asset I've given him. He has debts in London, Paris, and Monte Carlo that would shame a minor principality. And 6 months ago, I discovered that he had entered into a private arrangement with my competitors, Harwich and Bell, to sell them the shipping contracts after my death, at a fraction of their worth. Treason within the family," Poirot murmured. "Treason of the vilest kind. He would gut the empire I built. Not out of malice, but out of laziness. Because it is easier to sell than to manage. Because Philip has never in his life done a hard thing when a soft one was available. And your daughter, Constance? Constance is different." Something shifted in his face. Not softness exactly, but the memory of softness. "She has her mother's mind. Catherine, my first wife, was the only person who ever truly understood what I was building. Constance carries that understanding. She will keep the company whole, she will fight, and she will not sell. The new will leaves everything to Madame Constance. To Constance, with a trust for the workers' pension fund and a settlement for Vera, my second wife. Vera will be comfortable, but she will not control the estate. That distinction matters more than you know. And Lady Trask, Vera, she's aware of this change." Sir Marvin smiled, a terrible smile, thin as a razor. "Everyone in this house is aware of it. I made certain of that. I told them all at dinner last Monday that I intended to rewrite the will. I wanted to see their faces." "And what did you see?" "Exactly what I expected. Philip turned white. Vera turned red. Constance said nothing. which is how I know she already suspected. And Dr. Ellsworth, my physician, who has attended me for 15 years, asked if I had considered the strain such a decision might place upon my heart. Sir Marvin's laugh was dry as paper. My heart, as if my heart were the thing in danger. Poirot set down his brandy glass, untouched. Who else is in the house, Sir Marvin? I must know the complete cast before the curtain rises. My secretary, Leonard Hull, been with me 8 years, knows every detail of the business. Too clever by half, but loyal, I think. Mrs. Baird, the housekeeper, has been here since the flood, deaf as a post in the left ear, which makes her an excellent confidant. And there is one more guest arriving tomorrow, Felix Arden. He is Constance's fiancé, a solicitor. He'll be drafting the new will. The solicitor is your daughter's intended husband. Does that surprise you? I trust him because she trusts him, and Constance does not trust easily. It is the one trait she inherited from me. Then the household is complete. Sir Marvin, I accept your commission. Hercule Poirot will observe, and if necessary, he will act. But I must ask one thing of you. Name it. Do not die before Saturday. Sir Marvin Trask laughed again, and the sound rattled in his chest like dice in a cup. I'll do my damnedest, Poirot, but the Almighty keeps his own calendar. Harrison showed us to our rooms. Mine looked over the cedar and the sodden lawn. Poirot's, by some domestic miracle, faced the courtyard. Less picturesque, but protected from drafts, which I knew he would consider a far greater achievement than any view. He spent 10 minutes adjusting his toilette bottles before permitting himself to sit. Well, Hastings, what do you think? I think it's a miserable house with too many suspects and not enough light. And Sir Marvin? Dying, angry, and not accustomed to being afraid. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisement. A man who has commanded everything, factories, ships, men, now commands only a pen and a few remaining days. The pen is everything. With it, he redistributes a fortune. Without it, the current will stand. Philip inherits. Constance shares equally. Vera retains her position, and whoever has made arrangements that depend upon the present will, those arrangements survive. So the motive is clear. Someone wants to prevent the new will. The motive is transparent. The method, that is what we must discover before it discovers us. I left him arranging his cufflinks in parallel rows, a ritual that I have learned signifies deep thought. I went downstairs and found the household assembling for dinner in stages, like actors taking their marks. Lady Vera Trask came first. She was perhaps 45, handsome rather than pretty, with auburn hair that owed something to artifice and a figure that owed more to discipline. Her dress was black. Anticipatory mourning, I thought unkindly, and her pearls were the size of small ambitions. She regarded me with the practiced warmth of a hostess who has been smiling at strangers for 20 years and has learned to make it look unrehearsed. Captain Hastings, how delightful. Marvin mentioned you'd be joining us. You must find Sussex awfully dull after London. Not at all. The countryside has its charms. Yes. Her eyes drifted to the window where the rain had not relented. Charms. Philip Trask arrived next, and with him came a current of energy. Nervous, undirected, slightly too bright. He was 31, fair-haired, with the good looks of a man who has been told he is handsome so often that he has ceased to question what purpose it serves. His dinner jacket was immaculate. His smile was quick and slightly too wide. The famous detective's companion, he said, shaking my hand with a grip that felt rehearsed. Father has been reading about Poirot for months, ordered every newspaper clipping. One might think he was planning a murder rather than preventing one. Philip, Vera's voice carried a warning. A joke, darling. He poured himself a whiskey, his second, I guessed, by the ease of the gesture. Where would we be without humor in this mausoleum? Constance Trask entered quietly, the way serious people often do. She was 34, dark-haired, with her father's eyes, that same fierce blue, set in a face that was intelligent rather than beautiful. She wore grey, which on another woman might have seemed colourless, but on Constance looked like armour. She nodded to me, assessed me in a glance, and seemed to arrive at a conclusion that required no further conversation. Dr. Ellsworth followed her in. He was a man of 60, stout, whiskered, with the comfortable manner of a physician who has ministered to wealth long enough to consider himself its equal. His handshake was warm, his eyes less so. "Captain Hastings, I understand Monsieur Poirot is here as a guest." "Just so." "Splendid." Marvin could use the distraction. But the word distraction was chosen, I felt, with the precision of a prescription. Something mild, intended to reduce inflammation. Last came Leonard Hull, Sir Marvin's secretary. He was thin, dark, and quiet in the way that filing cabinets are quiet. Full of information, difficult to read from the outside. He took his seat at the table with the economy of movement of a man who knows his place and has decided, privately, that it is beneath him. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Mrs. Baird had laid on 6 courses as if daring mortality to interrupt the soup. But the conversation moved in careful circles, everyone avoiding the subject that sat at the table like an uninvited guest. The will, the money, the future that Sir Marvin was about to reshape like wet clay. Poirot ate modestly, spoke less, and observed everything. I watched his eyes travel from face to face, reading the small dramas that played beneath the surface. Philip's forced gaiety, Vera's controlled composure, Constance's watchful silence, Hull's careful neutrality, and Dr. Ellsworth's bluff assurance that all was well when plainly nothing was. After the port, which Philip drank and the rest of us merely held, Poirot and I walked the corridor back to our rooms. The house was quiet in the way old houses are quiet, not silent, but murmuring to itself, creaking, settling, breathing in its sleep. 3 of them could do it, I said. Philip, Vera, and Hull. 4, said Poirot. You forget the doctor. Ellsworth, but he has no financial interest. A man who has attended a millionaire for 15 years has interests that do not always appear in the accounts. But we shall see. Tomorrow, Mr. Felix Arden arrives with his documents, and the real game begins. He paused at his door. Hastings, one more thing. Lock your door tonight. Do you think... I think that a house in which a fortune hangs upon a signature is a house in which no one should sleep soundly. Good night, mon ami. The morning brought a reluctant sun that arrived late and apologized with a thin, golden haze. The rain had stopped, but the grounds remained treacherous. Puddles on the gravel, the lawn a dark green sponge. I went down early to find the house already stirring. Mrs. Baird was directing the laying of breakfast with the tactical skill of a field marshal. She was a woman of perhaps 60, broad, solid, with a face that had settled into permanent competence. Her left ear, as Sir Marvin had warned, was indeed unreliable, and she compensated by watching lips with the intensity of a card player studying an opponent's tell. Good morning, Captain. Kippers or kedgeree? Kippers, please. Sir Marvin has had his tray. He eats in the library now. The stairs tire him. She lowered her voice, though the deafness made her calibration imperfect. He was up in the night. I heard his bell at 2. Harrison went. Did he say what he wanted? Paper. He wanted writing paper, and his fountain pen, the black one with the gold nib. He keeps it locked in the desk. Harrison had to fetch the key. I filed this away and found Poirot in the breakfast room, already installed with coffee and a boiled egg that he was examining for geometric imperfections. Sir Marvin was writing in the night, I told him. So I have learned. Mrs. Baird is a most informative woman, though she does not know it. I have also learned from Harrison that the library door possesses 2 locks. One operated by a key that Sir Marvin keeps on his person, and one by a bolt on the inside. Last night the bolt was engaged when Harrison brought the paper. Sir Marvin opened it himself. He doesn't trust anyone. He trusts us, Hastings. That is why we are here, and now we must justify that trust. Felix Arden arrived at 11. He came in a modest motor car, which I thought spoke well of him, and carried a leather briefcase that he handled with the attentiveness of a man carrying holy relics. He was 36, clean-shaven, with a strong jaw and calm grey eyes, the sort of face that juries believe without quite knowing why. Constance met him on the steps. Their greeting was restrained, a touch of hands, a look that said everything their mouths did not. And I felt, not for the first time, the strange intimacy of witnessing affection between private people. Poirot observed the arrival from the window with the professional interest of a naturalist studying a species in its habitat. "He loves her," he said simply, "and she loves him. This is either very good or very bad, depending on the direction of events." The afternoon brought the reading, not of the new will, that was to be drafted that evening and signed on Saturday morning, but of Sir Marvin's instructions. We gathered in the library at 3. The fire had been built to a magnificent height, and Sir Marvin sat in his chair like a judge presiding over a case in which he was also the plaintiff. "I shall be brief," he said. "Mr. Arden has my instructions. The new will shall be drawn tonight and signed tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, in the presence of 2 witnesses, Mr. Poirot and Harrison. The principal terms are as follows." He recited them without notes. The estate, Briarstone Hall, the London house, the investments, the controlling interest in Trask Industries, went to Constance in trust. Philip received a fixed annuity of £2,000 per year, a fraction of what the current will provided. Lady Vera received the London house for her lifetime and an income sufficient, Sir Marvin said, with a cruelty that was almost gentle, to maintain the standards to which she has been inaccurately accustomed. Dr. Ellsworth was given a bequest of £5,000, with thanks for years of service. Leonard Hull received the same, on the condition that he remain with the company for a minimum of 5 years under Constance's direction. The reactions were instructive. Philip did not erupt. That was the surprise. He sat very still, his whiskey glass balanced on his knee, and smiled, a terrible, vacant smile, like a man who has just been told something in a language he does not speak. Then he set down the glass with exaggerated care and said, "Well, 2,000 a year. That won't keep me in cigarettes." "It will keep you alive," Sir Marvin said, "which is more than your habits deserve." "Father." "Do not argue with me, Philip. The decision is made." Vera said nothing. Her face was a mask, lovely and utterly unreadable, but her hand, resting on the arm of her chair, gripped the upholstery so tightly that the knuckles whitened, and she did not release it for the entire duration of the meeting. "Doctor." Ellsworth made a sound, a half sigh, half clearing of the throat, and said, "Marvin, I must urge you once more to consider the strain." "You may urge until the last trumpet, Ellsworth. My mind is made up." Hull, the secretary, wrote something in a small notebook with mechanical precision. His face showed nothing, but I saw Poirot watching him, watching the way his pen moved, the angle of his head, the faint compression of his lips, and I knew that something had been noted, filed, stored for later examination. Arden, the solicitor, closed his briefcase. "I shall draft the document this evening. If Sir Marvin approves the final text tonight, we can proceed to signing at 10 tomorrow." "I shall approve it," Sir Marvin said. "I have not reached 72 by changing my mind." The gathering broke apart in fragments. Philip left first too quickly without looking back. Vera followed, her heels striking the floor with a precision that sounded like punctuation. Ellsworth lingered, hovering near Sir Marvin with the dutiful anxiety of a man who knows his counsel will be ignored, but feels professionally obligated to offer it. Hull melted into the house as quietly as he had sat through the meeting. Constance remained. She stood beside her father's chair and placed her hand on his. He did not look at her, but his fingers closed over hers, and for a moment the fierce old man and his serious daughter were simply two people holding on to what remained. Poirot and I withdrew to the corridor. "The stage is set," he said quietly. "The curtain rises tonight. By tomorrow morning the will shall be signed, or it shall not. And between those two outcomes, Hastings, lies the space in which murder lives." The evening fell upon Briarstone Hall like a lid upon a box. Fog crept up from the valley and enveloped the house in a grey obscurity that blurred the boundaries between inside and outside, making the lit windows glow like lanterns in the hold of a ship. The cedar on the lawn vanished entirely, and one had the eerie sensation of floating. The house detached from the earth, adrift in murk. Dinner was quieter than the night before. Philip drank steadily, but said little. Vera made conversation with the mechanical grace of a woman operating a social machine that has been running on its own fuel for years. Dr. Ellsworth spoke of a medical journal article on cardiac arrhythmia with the excessive detail of a man filling silence because silence frightens him. Hull ate. Constance and Arden sat side by side, their occasional glances carrying the weight of words unspoken. Sir Marvin did not come down. Harrison brought him a tray in the library, where he was reviewing the will's final draft with Arden. At 10 o'clock, Arden descended the stairs, carrying the briefcase, his face composed but watchful. "It is done," he said to Constance. "Your father has approved the text. I shall make the fair copy tonight. The signing is at 10 tomorrow morning." "How is he?" Constance asked. "Tired, but determined." Arden paused. "He asked me to tell you. He wants no visitors tonight. Harrison will attend him. He wishes to be alone with his thoughts." The household dispersed to its various corners. I went to Poirot's room, where I found him standing at the window, staring into the fog as if it were a document he was trying to read. "It will happen tonight," he said. "You're certain?" "Tomorrow the will is signed and the opportunity closes. If someone intends to act, they must do so in the hours between now and 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The mathematics of murder, Hastings, they are as unyielding as the mathematics of the bank. What do we do?" "We watch. You will take the corridor outside the library from midnight until 3. I will take it from 3 until dawn. Arm yourself with patience and a book. Do not sleep. And if someone comes, then you will see them, and they will see you, and the act of seeing will be sufficient. A witness is the most powerful weapon against a murderer who relies upon secrecy." I took my post at midnight. The corridor was long, dim and cold. The sort of passageway in which one feels observed by the portraits, even when one knows they are merely paint and canvas. The library door was closed. No light showed beneath it. Sir Marvin, presumably, had retired to his bed, a small room adjacent to the library, connected by a private door. The hours passed with excruciating slowness. At 12:30, Harrison climbed the stairs, carrying a glass of warm milk. He nodded to me, a wordless acknowledgement of our shared vigil, and entered the library with a key. I heard the murmur of voices, the clink of glass. Then Harrison emerged, locked the door, and descended. The bolt, I heard, slid home from inside. Sir Marvin was sealed in. At 1 o'clock, footsteps. Philip Trask appeared at the far end of the corridor, dressed in a smoking jacket, a cigarette burning between his fingers. He saw me, paused, and smiled. That same vacant, terrible smile. "Keeping guard, Hastings." "Couldn't sleep." "No, nobody sleeps in this house." He leaned against the wall, dragging on the cigarette. "You know, he's done this before." The old man. Made a threat, dangled the axe. Usually he relents. He enjoys the theater of punishment, but he hasn't the heart for the execution. By morning he'll soften. He always does. You think he'll change his mind? Philip's eyes in the corridor's dim light were unreadable. I think a dying man's convictions are like candles in a draught. One gust. He blew a stream of smoke. Good night, Hastings. He went away. I heard his door close, far down the passage. At 2 o'clock, another sound. Not footsteps, but a creak. The kind of creak that old houses manufacture from their own substance, but also the kind that a door makes when opened by someone who does not wish to be heard. I stood, my senses sharpening. The sound came from below. The ground floor, perhaps the servants' entrance, perhaps the side door that led to the garden. I debated going to investigate, but Poirot's instructions had been explicit. Do not leave the corridor. I remained. At 3, Poirot appeared, immaculate as ever, as though sleep were a minor social engagement he had politely declined. He carried a small electric torch and a cushion for the chair. Anything? He whispered. I told him of Philip's visit and the creak. A creak, he repeated. In this house, one must distinguish between the creak that is architecture and the creak that is intention. But go now, Hastings. Sleep. I will keep the watch. I slept badly, as one does when the mind will not consent to the body's fatigue. At some point I heard, or dreamed I heard, the sound of a bell, a single, clear note, like a handbell rung once and immediately muffled. I woke to morning and to silence. The fog had lifted slightly, replaced by a grey light that made the world look as if it had been drawn in pencil. I washed, dressed, and went down. Poirot was in the breakfast room. His face told me everything. What has happened? Sir Marvin Trask, said Poirot, is dead. He had been found by Harrison at 7 o'clock. The butler had knocked, received no answer, and used his key. The bolt on the inside was still engaged. Harrison had been forced to enter through the adjacent bedroom, whose connecting door was unlocked. Sir Marvin sat in his leather chair before the dead fire, his head inclined to one side, his eyes closed, and on his face an expression that was neither peace nor pain, but something between the two, a kind of interrupted resolve as if death had arrived mid-sentence. On the desk before him lay the writing paper he had requested in the night. The fountain pen, the black one with the gold nib, rested in his right hand, the cap still off. And on the paper, in Sir Marvin's bold, angular script, were 5 words. I wish to say that. The sentence was unfinished. The pen had trailed off the edge of the paper, leaving a thin line of ink that tapered to nothing. Dr. Ellsworth, summoned from his room, examined the body with the heavy competence of a man performing a duty he had long anticipated. Heart failure, he said. I warned him. The strain of recent weeks, the emotional disturbance, the refusal to rest. It was only a matter of time. The time, said Poirot quietly, is precisely the question. He stood beside the desk, his hands folded, his eyes moving across the scene with that systematic care I knew so well. He did not touch the body. He did not touch the paper. He looked at everything as a man looks at a painting, the whole first, then the details, then the spaces between. The fire, he said. It is dead. When did Harrison last tend it? At 11 last night, the butler answered. I built it up before retiring. And at midnight, when you brought the warm milk, it was burning well. So it burned for perhaps 2 or 3 hours after midnight and then expired. The room would have grown cold by 4 or 5 in the morning. Poirot touched the arm of the chair. Sir Marvin is dressed. He wears his smoking jacket and his indoor shoes. He did not go to bed. He often sat up late, Vera said from the doorway. Her voice was steady, her face arranged in an expression of dignified sorrow that I found both admirable and faintly suspicious. The paper, Poirot continued. He was writing something. I wished to say that he did not finish. The pen fell from his hand at the moment of death or immediately before. Heart failure, Ellsworth repeated, more firmly this time. The man was dying. We all knew it. This was simply the end coming sooner than expected. And the new will? I asked. Silence. A terrible, weighted silence. Every face in the room performed its own calculation. Felix Arden spoke first. The fair copy was completed last night. I left it in my room. It requires only Sir Marvin's signature and the witnessing, which it will never receive, Philip said. His voice was flat, without triumph, without sorrow, the voice of a man watching a number come up on a wheel. The old will stands. Poirot raised one finger. No one leaves this house. Now see here, Philip began. No one, Poirot repeated, and the word carried an authority that silenced even the son of a millionaire. Sir Marvin invited Hercule Poirot to ensure that his last wish was carried out. He is dead before that wish could be executed. This is either the work of nature or the work of a human hand, until I am satisfied which no one departs Briarstone Hall. He turned to Ellsworth. Doctor, you will perform a full examination. I wish to know the precise cause and approximate time of death. If there is any substance in the body that should not be there, I wish to know that also. Ellsworth bristled. I've been his physician for 15 years. I know his condition intimately. Then the examination will only confirm what you already know. It should take no more than an hour. The doctor left, grumbling. Poirot asked Harrison to lock the library and give him the key. He then requested, with a politeness that permitted no refusal, that each member of the household remain in their rooms until summoned. When we were alone, I said, Poison. It is possible. The warm milk at midnight, the coffee at dinner, the medicine that Dr. Ellsworth prescribes. Any of these could carry a substance that would stop a weakened heart. But the room was bolted from inside. Yes. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The bolt. That is the puzzle within the puzzle. The door was bolted. Harrison could not enter. He went through the adjacent bedroom. The connecting door, unlocked. So Sir Marvin bolted the corridor door, but left the bedroom door open. Because he trusted the bedroom was private, or because someone persuaded him to unbolt the bedroom door after Harrison left, or because someone was already inside when the bolt was thrown. I stared at him. Already inside. But Harrison would have seen them. Harrison brought milk at midnight. The room was lit by the fire and a single lamp. There are alcoves, Hastings, behind the bookshelves. I observed them yesterday. A man or woman standing very still in such an alcove, concealed by the projection of the shelves, would not be visible from the center of the room, particularly to a butler whose concern was the delivery of milk, not the conducting of a search. Good God. We shall see. He moved to the door. Come, we begin the interviews. And Hastings, yes? Watch the hands. When people lie about small things, their hands confess what their mouths deny. Philip Trask received us in his room with the insolence of a man who believes he has already won. He reclined in a chair, whiskey at his elbow despite the hour, and regarded Poirot with the amused condescension of a schoolboy evaluating a tutor he considers his inferior. Ask away, Poirot. I have nothing to hide. Where were you last night between midnight and 7? In bed. Asleep. I woke once. Hastings saw me in the corridor around 1. I smoked a cigarette and returned. That is all. You did not enter the library. The door was bolted. You know that. The bedroom, then. The adjacent room. Philip's smile flickered. Why would I enter my father's bedroom? To gain access to the library through the connecting door. To stand beside a dying man and ensure that the pen did not complete its journey across the page. That is an accusation. It is a possibility. You had the strongest motive. The new will would reduce your income to a pittance. The old will gives you half of everything. Philip set down his glass. The amusement had drained from his face, replaced by something harder, colder. My father was dying, Poirot. Everyone knew it. The doctors gave him months, perhaps weeks. I had only to wait. Ah, but waiting is precisely what you could not do. Tomorrow morning the new will would be signed. After that, waiting would profit you nothing. I did not kill my father. Then you will not object to my examining your room, your clothing, and your hands. Philip's jaw tightened, but he nodded. A single, sharp inclination, like a man accepting a duel. The room revealed nothing remarkable. Philip's evening clothes lay draped over a chair. His shoes, I examined the soles, were dry. No trace of mud, no evidence of nocturnal wandering beyond the carpeted corridor. His hands were clean, the fingernails immaculate. Poirot lingered at the bedside table, where a small brown bottle stood beside a glass of water. Your sleeping draught? Prescribed by Ellsworth. I suffer from insomnia. And yet you were awake at 1. The draught doesn't always work. Ask the doctor. Poirot picked up the bottle, read the label, and set it down without comment. But I saw his eyes fix upon it with the particular attention he reserves for objects that do not entirely belong where they are found. Vera Trask was composed to the point of architecture. She received us in a sitting room that adjoined her bedroom, dressed in black with the same impressive pearls, her hair arranged, her face correct. She had been weeping. The slight puffiness around the eyes betrayed her. But the tears had been conducted privately and were not offered for display. I retired at 11, she said. I took a sleeping tablet and slept until Harrison woke the household at 7. You heard nothing? Nothing. The tablet is quite effective. And your relations with Sir Marvin, forgive me, Lady Trask. They were harmonious. A flicker. We were married, Monsieur Poirot. Marriage is not a synonym for harmony. Marvin was a difficult man, brilliant, commanding, utterly certain of his own judgment. These are admirable qualities in a businessman. In a husband, they are exhausting. The new will would have reduced your position considerably. It would have given me the London house and a comfortable income. I'm not a greedy woman, Monsieur Poirot. I married Marvin knowing what he was. I stayed knowing what he became. I do not require his fortune to survive. And yet survival, Lady Trask, takes many forms. She met his eyes. If you believe I killed my husband, say so plainly. I believe, Madame, that someone in this house ensured that Sir Marvin's last wish would remain unfinished. I do not yet know who, but I will. Leonard Hull, when summoned, brought his notebook, as though being interviewed by a detective were a business meeting requiring minutes. He sat with his legs crossed, his pen poised, and answered Poirot's questions with the verbal economy of a man who has spent 8 years reducing complexity to bullet points. I was in my room from 10:30 onward. I worked on the quarterly accounts until approximately 1. Then I slept. You did not hear the bell. Mrs. Baird reports that Sir Marvin rang it too. My room is in the east wing. The bell system does not extend there. The accounts you were working on, they concern Trask Industries. Yes. And the irregularities that Mr. Mallory, forgive me, Philip, has alluded to? The debts? The dealings with Harwich and Bell? Hull's pen stopped moving. He looked at Poirot with an expression that was not quite surprise, but rather the controlled response of a man who has rehearsed for this question without expecting it so soon. I'm aware of Philip's debts. I have managed Sir Marvin's finances for 8 years. There are no irregularities in the company accounts. And in the personal accounts? Those are Sir Marvin's concern. Sir Marvin is dead, Monsieur Hull. His concerns are now mine. Hull closed the notebook. Sir Marvin made certain payments in the last year that I was not authorized to question. Large sums in cash to recipients I could not identify. I noted them. I said nothing. It was not my place. But you have theories. I have observations. Theories are above my station. Poirot dismissed him, and I saw in his eyes the look of a man adding a new column to an already complex equation. Dr. Ellsworth returned at noon with the results of his examination. He was flushed, his whiskers bristling, his professional dignity assembled like a barricade. "Heart failure," he said. "As I told you, the myocardium was already severely compromised. The strain of the past weeks, the emotional agitation, the refusal to rest, precipitated a terminal episode. There is no evidence whatsoever of foul play. No unusual substances. I performed a thorough examination. There is nothing to suggest poison. And yet," said Poirot, "I should like to send samples to a laboratory in London. You will not object?" Ellsworth's face colored. "I will not be second-guessed by, you will not be second-guessed. You will be confirmed. If your diagnosis is correct, the laboratory will say so, and your reputation will be enhanced. If it is not," Poirot spread his hands, "well, then we shall all have learned something." The samples were dispatched with the afternoon post, carried by Harrison in Sir Marvin's own motor car. We would not have results for 2 days. In the meantime, Poirot had the house to himself, the household confined, the evidence preserved, and the pressure of unanswered questions working upon the guilty mind like water upon stone. He spent the afternoon in the library. I accompanied him. The room, without its occupant, felt like a cathedral after the congregation has gone. Vast, echoing, full of residual presence. Sir Marvin's chair still bore the impression of his body. The desk still held the unfinished paper. I wish to say that Poirot stood before the desk for a long time, reading those 5 words as though they were a cipher. What was he trying to say? I asked. That, Hastings, is the question upon which everything turns. I wish to say that it is a man beginning a declaration, a statement of intent, but of what? A change to the will? A confession? An accusation? He could have been writing a letter. At 2 a.m, having rung for paper at that hour. Something woke him. Something compelled him to write, and something stopped him before he could finish. He turned from the desk and moved to the bookshelves. The alcoves I had noticed were indeed deep enough to conceal a person, dark recesses formed by the projection of the shelving units, each perhaps 2 feet deep and shadowed by the angles of the room. "A person standing here," Poirot said, positioning himself within one, "would be invisible from the door, from the chair, from anywhere in the central room unless one specifically looked. The firelight would not reach. The lamp on the desk would cast its circle forward, not backward into these corners. So someone could have hidden here before Harrison brought the milk at midnight, waited for the bolt to be thrown, and then approached Sir Marvin in the small hours, when the fire had died, when the old man dozed in his chair, when the house was as silent as the grave it was about to become. He emerged from the alcove, brushing his sleeve. But approached to do what? Ellsworth says there is no poison, there are no marks of violence. The door was bolted. The window. He crossed to the window and examined it. Latched from inside. The chimney. Absurd, this is not a fairy tale. We must think, Hastings. We must think as the murderer thought. If it is murder. It is murder. The little grey cells. They are certain. But the method. The method is elegant. It is almost invisible, and that tells me something about our killer. What does it tell you? That they are patient, that they are clever, and that they understand the human heart, not merely its emotions, but its mechanics. He said nothing more that afternoon. He sat in Sir Marvin's chair, an act of presumption that only Poirot could make seem like homage, and thought. The fire, freshly lit by Harrison, crackled and spat. The carved jade figurines watched from their shelf, impassive as jurors who have already reached their verdict. The laboratory results arrived on Monday morning. Harrison had driven through the night. The envelope, when Poirot opened it, contained a single page of analysis and a covering letter from the toxicologist. Poirot read it twice. Then he folded it and placed it in his breast pocket. "Well?" I demanded. "Digitalis," he said. "Not in the stomach, not in the blood, in the milk." The warm milk Harrison brought at midnight. The concentration was not sufficient to kill a healthy man, but Sir Marvin was not a healthy man. His heart was already failing. A dose of digitalis in his nightly milk, a dose that by itself might merely cause palpitations in a robust person, would be lethal to a man whose myocardium was, as Dr. Ellsworth so accurately described, severely compromised. Then it was poison. Who prepared the milk? Mrs. Baird heated it. Harrison carried it up. Between the kitchen and the library, the glass passed through 2 pairs of hands. But, Poirot raised a finger, anyone in the house could have added the digitalis to the glass while it sat on the kitchen table waiting to be carried up. Mrs. Baird confirms that she left the glass for several minutes while she attended to the banked stove. So anyone could have done it. Anyone who was downstairs and awake? Yes. But where would they get digitalis? Poirot smiled, that thin, predatory smile that means the trap has been set and the mechanism oiled. From Dr. Ellsworth's medical bag, which sits in the downstairs surgery, unlocked, accessible, containing precisely the substance that could stop a weakened heart. Or, he paused, from the small brown bottle on Philip Trask's bedside table. Philip's sleeping draught, which is not a sleeping draught at all. I examined the label. It is a compound preparation containing, among other sedatives, a tincture of digitalis, prescribed by Dr. Ellsworth for Philip's insomnia. In the dosage recommended, it is harmless, but extracted, concentrated, and added to a glass of warm milk intended for a man with a failing heart. Good Lord, then Philip, or anyone who had access to Philip's room and understood the contents of that bottle, which includes, at the very least, Dr. Ellsworth, who prescribed it. Poirot assembled the household at 4 o'clock in the library. The fire burned. The jade figurines watched. Sir Marvin's chair, by Poirot's instruction, stood empty, a presence more powerful than any of the living. They came in 1s and 2s. Philip, pale now, the bravado gone. Vera, rigid as porcelain. Constance, grey-eyed and watchful. Arden, standing behind her like a sentinel. Hull, notebook in hand, though I noticed his pen did not move. Dr. Ellsworth, ruddy with indignation. Harrison at the door, with Mrs. Baird hovering behind him in the corridor, straining her good ear towards the room. Poirot took his position beside the desk. The unfinished letter lay where it had been found. I wish to say that, Mesdames, Messieurs, he began, Sir Marvin Trask is dead. His physician tells us it was natural, the heart, weakened by age and illness, that simply stopped. And for a time Hercule Poirot was tempted to agree. There was no wound, no mark of violence, no obvious poison. The room was bolted from within. The scene was almost perfect. He paused. Almost, because perfection, in crime as in art, is the enemy of truth. The scene was too perfect, too arranged. A dying man sits in his chair, pen in hand, writing his last words. The fire dies. He dies. It is poetic, and poetry, Messieurs, is the language of the liar who wishes to be believed. Philip shifted in his seat. Vera's hand found the pearls at her throat. The laboratory analysis has confirmed what my little grey cells suspected. Sir Marvin was poisoned. Digitalis, the very substance used to treat his heart, was administered in excessive quantity in his nightly milk. In a healthy man, the dose would cause discomfort. In Sir Marvin, it was lethal. Dr. Ellsworth half rose. Impossible. You examined, Doctor, and found what you expected to find. Heart failure. Because that is what digitalis produces. It stops the heart. If one is already treating a patient for cardiac disease, the symptoms of poisoning are indistinguishable from the symptoms of the disease itself. It is the perfect murder weapon, hidden inside the cure. Ellsworth sank back, his face ashen. "Now," said Poirot, "who had the means?" "Digitalis is present in your medical bag, doctor, which was stored unlocked in the downstairs surgery. It is also present, in a modified form, in the sleeping preparation you prescribed for Philip Trask. And it is available, of course, to anyone with knowledge of pharmacy and access to the chemist's shop in the village." He began to pace, slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The opportunity was narrow. The milk was prepared by Mrs. Baird and left unattended in the kitchen for several minutes before Harrison carried it up. Anyone who was awake and mobile between 11:30 and midnight could have added the substance. The question, then, is not merely who could, but who knew. He stopped pacing. Who knew that Sir Marvin's heart was so weakened that a concentrated dose of his own medicine would kill him? Who understood the pharmacology well enough to calculate the lethal quantity? Who knew the routine of the household, the nightly milk, the few minutes it sat untended, well enough to exploit it? His gaze moved from face to face. "Philip, you had the motive, the will, the fortune. But you are not, forgive me, a man who understands pharmacology. You drink whiskey, not science. And you were seen in the corridor at 1. If you had already poisoned the milk, you would not have lingered where you could be observed. The guilty do not promenade." Philip's mouth opened, then closed. "Lady Trask, you had motive also. The new will diminished you, but your sleeping tablet, which I have verified is genuine, would have rendered you incapable of the precise timing required. And the digitalis, you have no medical knowledge, no access to the surgery that would not have been noted." Vera's expression did not change, but something behind it, some held tension, eased fractionally. "Constance, you had the least to gain from your father's death before the signing. The new will favored you. His survival until 10 o'clock Saturday morning was your interest, not his death. Mr. Arden, the same logic applies. You drafted the will that would have made your fiancée the richest woman in Sussex. You needed Sir Marvin alive." "Hull," Poirot continued, "you are clever, efficient, and you knew the household routine perfectly. But you also knew that the new will required you to remain with the company for 5 years, a condition that secured your employment and your future. Sir Marvin's death before the signing left your position dependent upon the goodwill of Philip, who has no goodwill, and Constance, who may not retain you. It is not in your interest." He stopped before the fireplace and turned to face Dr. Ellsworth. "Which leaves you, doctor?" Ellsworth's face had gone from ruddy to grey. He gripped the arms of his chair as if the room had begun to tilt. "You have been Sir Marvin's physician for 15 years. You know the condition of his heart as intimately as your own. You prescribed the digitalis for his treatment, and you prescribed a digitalis-containing compound for Philip's insomnia. You have unrestricted access to your medical bag, which contains pure digitalis in concentrated form. You know the household routine, the nightly milk, the unattended minutes in the kitchen. You understand, as no one else in this house truly does, the exact dose that would stop a weakened heart while appearing to be the natural failure you had been predicting for months." "This is outrageous," Ellsworth whispered. "But why?" Poirot's voice softened. "Why would a respected physician murder his patient? This is the question that troubled me. The bequest of £5,000 is not sufficient motive for a man of your position. What was it, doctor, that Sir Marvin could give you, or take from you, that made his death a necessity?" Silence. The fire spoke into it. A pop, a hiss, the settling of coals. "The payments," said Poirot. "The large cash payments that Hull observed and could not explain. They were not made to competitors. They were not bribes. They were made to you, Dr. Ellsworth." "Lies," Ellsworth said, but his voice had lost its foundation. For 15 years, you have been Sir Marvin's physician. For 15 years, you have also been his confidant, the keeper of his medical secrets. And medical secrets, Doctor, in a man whose business empire depends upon his perceived strength, his vigor, his command, those secrets have a value that is not easily measured. Poirot's eyes were relentless. Sir Marvin's competitors, his investors, his board, none of them knew the true state of his health. You ensured it. You wrote favorable reports. You suppressed alarming symptoms. You allowed a dying man to appear vital, robust, capable of commanding his empire for years to come. And in return, Sir Marvin paid you handsomely. In cash, off the books, untraceable. It was an arrangement, Ellsworth breathed. Nothing more. An arrangement that the new will would have ended. Constance Trask is not a woman who would continue to pay a doctor to lie. She would demand honest assessments. She would bring in new physicians. The truth about Sir Marvin's condition, suppressed for years, would emerge. And with it, the truth about your complicity, your fraudulent medical reports, your career, Doctor, your entire reputation, built upon a foundation of paid dishonesty. Ellsworth was shaking now. His hands trembled. His magnificent whiskers seemed to droop. When Sir Marvin announced the new will, you saw the end approaching, not his end, but yours. Constance would inherit. She would investigate. She would find the payments, question the reports, discover the deception. And you, the trusted family physician, would be ruined. I warned him, Ellsworth said, and his voice cracked. I told him not to change the will. I begged him. He wouldn't listen. He never listened. And so you ensured that the old will would stand, a concentrated dose of digitalis in the warm milk, administered through the routine you knew by heart, the murder disguised as the very disease you had been concealing. The perfect circle. The lie that protected you became the lie that killed him. Ellsworth's head dropped into his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was the voice of a man who has been carrying a weight for so long that its removal feels not like relief, but like falling. He was dying anyway, he whispered. Weeks, perhaps days. I merely hastened what was inevitable. You murdered a man to protect your secret, Poirot said, and in doing so, you stole from him the one thing he valued above all others, the right to decide what happened to the work of his lifetime. His last wish, Doctor. You took it from him. The room was very still. And the letter, Poirot added, moving to the desk. I wish to say that... He looked down at the 5 words as though they were a message from the dead. Sir Marvin woke in the night. He felt the effects of the poison, the arrhythmia, the shortness of breath. He knew, as a man of his intelligence would know, that something was wrong. He rang for paper. He began to write. A statement, an accusation, a final declaration that would survive him. But the digitalis was faster than his pen. He lifted the paper gently. 5 words. They are not enough to name his killer, but they are enough to tell us that he knew. In his last moments, Sir Marvin Trask understood that he had been betrayed by the one man he had trusted with the truth of his own body. Inspector Dawes of the Sussex Constabulary arrived within the hour, summoned by the telephone that Harrison had been instructed to use the moment Poirot gave the signal. Dr. Ellsworth was taken into custody with the quiet efficiency that the English police reserve for men of professional standing. No handcuffs, no roughness, merely a firm hand on the elbow and a motor car waiting on the gravel. As they led him away, Ellsworth paused at the door and looked back at the library, at the chair, the desk, the unfinished letter. He would have died anyway, he said again. Perhaps, said Poirot, but the dying, they have rights also. The right to finish their sentence, the right to bestow what they have built. You took from him, Doctor, the only power remaining to a man who had lost everything else, the power of his last wish. Ellsworth said nothing more. The door closed. The motor car departed. The gravel crunched and was silent. The household dispersed, each to their own reckoning. Philip went to the window and stood there a long time, looking out at the cedar and the grey lawn. Whether he felt relief or shame, I could not tell. Perhaps in the complicated arithmetic of inheritance, he felt both. Vera retired to her room. Constance remained in the library with Arden, speaking in low voices, their heads close together, making plans for a future that had been restored to them by the unmasking of a murderer, though not in the form they had hoped. "The new will," I said to Poirot as we walked the corridor. "It was never signed. The old will stands. Philip inherits equally, the very outcome Sir Marvin wished to prevent. The law is rigid, Hastings. An unsigned will has no force. The courts will decide according to the document that exists, not the one that was intended." Then Ellsworth succeeded. In a way, he got what he wanted. The old arrangements survive. He succeeded in nothing. Poirot's voice was sharp. He will stand trial for murder. His career is destroyed. His reputation is ash. And the fortune he sought to protect his access to, he will never touch a penny of it. We paused at the window. The sun, as if remembering its obligations, had broken through the clouds, and the cedar's shadow lay upon the lawn like a long, dark arm. "But there is one more thing, Hastings," Poirot said, and his voice grew softer. "Before the inspector arrived, I spoke privately with Constance. I told her the contents of the new will, which Mr. Arden, as the solicitor, can attest to in court. I told her that her father's wish, though never signed into law, was a matter of record. And I told her that in English equity, a clear expression of testamentary intent, documented, witnessed, and supported by the testimony of a solicitor, can, in certain circumstances, be given effect by a sympathetic judge." "You mean the new will might still be honored?" "I mean that Constance Trask has a case. Not a certainty, but a case, and Mr. Arden is, I am told, an exceptionally persuasive solicitor." He smiled. "Sir Marvin chose his daughter's husband well. A man who fights with documents is far more dangerous than one who fights with fists." I laughed. It felt odd in that house of shadows, but right. Poirot touched my arm. "Come, Hastings. We have done what we were asked to do, the millionaire's last wish. We could not fulfill it entirely. No one could. Death arrived before the pen completed its work. But we have done the next best thing. We have ensured that the truth is known, and the truth has a way of finding its destination, even when the letter is unfinished." We drove away from Briarstone Hall that afternoon. The rain had returned, softly now, as if the weather had exhausted its fury and settled into a kind of melancholy patience. The house receded in the mirror, its chimneys thin as fingers raised against the grey sky. The cedar endured. In the car, Poirot adjusted his coat, examined his cuffs, and made a small sound of satisfaction. Not at the case, I think, but at the restoration of a certain order. The guilty were named, the innocent were free, the grey cells had done their work. "You know," I said, "Sir Marvin never finished his sentence. I wish to say that we'll never know what followed." Poirot was quiet for a moment. Then he said, with that compassion that sometimes surfaces in him like a spring through granite, "I think, Hastings, that a man who sits down at 2 a.m. to write his truth, knowing he is dying, knowing the world will continue without him, I think such a man was trying to say something very simple." "What?" "That it mattered, all of it, the steel, the ships, the fortune, the daughter who understood him, the son who did not. That a man's life is not merely what he built, but what he wished for those who remain." He looked out at the rain, the passing fields, the grey world turning slowly toward winter. The sentence was unfinished, but the wish was clear, and the wish, mon ami, is the thing that survives. We drove on into the fading light, and behind us the house stood as it had always stood. Patient, grey, holding its secrets, yielding them only to those who knew how to listen.